Nick works at EA. Met Nick at EA, and also doing some Mari training. He's an expert at Mari, showing me some of his work through the past year or so, and he does some of the best work I've seen. And so, definitely wanted to try and take the opportunity to show you guys,
Thank you.
how a professional uses Mari. Now, next week we're going to have another Mari session, and that's just going to be the basics of how to, of the interface and how to use Mari. But this session is going to be about how a professional uses it. All right. So let's go ahead and let's have a quick chat with Nick. So Nick,
Yeah,
how did you work at EA? How
yeah.
did you get started being a movie artist in general?
Well, actually went to school for industrial design and got my first job in San Diego. And turned out I ended up working as a tester at Sony. And that was my first job, and that was '97. And the nice thing about that first job is I got exposed to like PlayStation 1 and knowing how to create models and textures. And at the time, I was doing a little bit of concept. And PlayStation 1, a lot of people ended up doing pretty much everything: lighting, texturing, modeling, animation, graphics, illustration. But yeah, got into games as a tester. Then I slowly transitioned into art, and been doing it since then.
Wow, dude! And you've worked on a lot of games. I'm pretty sure a lot of people watching here have probably played before, especially through the years. And what I find interesting is, I mean, if you started out with PlayStation One, you've seen the real development of graphics over the past 15 years. I mean, I remember when Doom came out, that was just a complete shift on how game assets were created, and now we're getting into another one of these big shifts where we're moving towards more physically based materials. How has that been, having to make change after change after change? Because I kind of see it as in the time span that you've been working as a game artist, there's been three major shifts. How has that affected you?
Well, that's an interesting question. I think a lot of what I've seen over the past 14 or 15 years is just being able to adapt to different tools, different pipelines. I know the original PlayStation. It was we had like 1 megabyte of texture space and 10,000 triangles, so we really had to pick and choose where that went. And slowly, through the generations of PlayStations and Xboxes, we started getting more and more features. And it's really interesting that some of the games that I've worked on that are some of my favorites for PS1. Some of the people I've been meeting recently are so young they've never seen them or played them. Games like Cool Borders or Rallycross or Twisted Metal 4 for PS1. All good stuff. But yeah, transitioning between the generations has been all about adapting to different things, and I think that's probably one of the things I saw about the Red Dead Redemption art team that I worked with in San Diego. Is everybody there was very open-minded and willing to try new things.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. Okay, so I mean, you can't work in games without having at least at some point in your life had a love for video games and played them. Do you still play games?
Absolutely. I mean, I definitely enjoy them all, and that's one of the problems I have now is I have way too many hobbies and too many interests and things to get into, and just like my games, I have probably unopened 4 or 5 that I'm going to get to. But yeah, absolutely. I basically have all of the new consoles, and I'm a classic game player too. I have a lot of the old systems, TurboGrafx, and all the Nintendos, the handhelds, throughout the generations.
Wow.
But do you have Pong the system?
I do.
Nice. Awesome.
I do. But
Love
yeah,
it.
I'm so proud of you, Nick. You just shut down on one of Brandon's like nerd bully moments.
That is not a nerd bully moment.
That
No,
was a
I
nerd
just
bully moment. Like,
I
yeah, you have like
appreciate.
Pong, the system.
Oh, my voice isn't that deep. No, I was really excited to see. I have met very few people who had the Pong system, so it's and yeah, it's a kind of a blight upon humanity that
Well,
I
well,
get.
Brandon, did you have the Texas Instruments game system from the early '80s?
I did. Just don't type in certain combinations to form words. It gets graphic.
I've got that.
Wow.
I've got that bad boy too at home.
Nice, nice.
Yeah. Whether or not they're all working, I couldn't tell you. I haven't
Yeah,
fired them
exactly.
up.
Wow, that's crazy. Awesome, awesome. All right. Well, what games have you played recently? Anything stand out to you recently that you played? I mean, we've had a really good year of games.
You know, Fallout 4,
Hmm.
it's been pretty amazing. Of course, Battlefront, uh, Star Wars Battlefront, awesome game.
Absolutely.
Uh,
I
the,
agree.
Rick, gorgeous.
yeah, so there's been a few on my list that I've been wanting to play, but surprisingly, the game I played most recently is Monopoly on the Xbox with the kids, and that was a ton of fun.
Wow. And I didn't even think about
A
that.
little
That's
bit more
yeah,
casual,
really.
but it's fun stuff.
Yeah, the board games and the consoles have a whole new sphere of interactivity. It's pretty
I
cool.
bought a GameCube just because of Mario Party. That was it. It was just I absolutely loved the board game on the console notion.
Yep, yep,
All right, cool. Well, okay, so definitely like to see how you work in Mari Nick, and
sure, yeah.
what are you going to be showing us today? If you want to explain what's on the screen right now.
Absolutely. This is basically a piece that I've been wanting to do for quite some time. I bought a parts manual for the Honda Z50 probably about 3 years ago, and it's always been one of those projects that I've been wanting to finish. I just never really got around to doing. And I'm definitely a Honda fan. I'm definitely a fan of motorcycles and mini bikes. And this design in particular is really cool. I really like it, and just wanted to do it in Mari. It looked like a really fun Mari project, and it had a lot of the similarities to some of the assets that I'm doing currently at work that I can't show. But a lot of the components to this piece are very similar, and just wanted to have a little bit of fun, and I hope you guys enjoy it.
Okay, and just one thing to clarify as I was talking to Nick about this whole presentation, obviously, he can't show things that he did at work. And we were trying to figure out, okay, well, let's just grab this asset from our Moto content and paint that. And Nick was like, no, you know what? I want to actually do something from the ground up that represents the style of work that I do at work. So you aren't seeing what he does at work, but you're seeing the same quality level and the same approach. And I just want to throw out some credit to you for that because that was an awesome amount of effort that you threw
Yeah,
in there.
big
And the
props.
entire model was done in Moto, by the way, everything.
Awesome.
And just to let everybody out there know that. And so,
Yeah,
one last question before we get started.
sure.
Why have you gravitated towards Mari?
Well, I've always been I've since the beginning of the my career, I've always been wanting a 3D package that I can paint in 3D with, and there were a number of products out there that promised the dream. But I think Mari delivers it, and it's very cool. Like you were saying earlier, I only used two software packages for this whole piece, Moto and Mari. There were no other softwares used. There was no other 2D editors or 2D paint programs. So yeah, I mean, Mari is been a program that I've been using for a few years now, and I love it. It's a industrial package. It doesn't feel like a toy. It feels like a real program that is just solid and professional and stable. Yeah, it's a joy to work in.
Awesome. All right. Well, without further ado, let's have you take us through your project, and of course, you have some description to do, especially in those early portions, and after you get on from making base materials onto weathering textures, and at that point, if you just want to work and paint and stuff like that, and don't want to continue talking, Brandon and I will be here chatting. We'll field questions because I'm sure people in the chat room will be
Definitely.
interested in asking some questions. So, guys out there in the chat room, if you have some questions as he's doing his quiet, just painting component of all this, we'll field those questions for you. So, let's go ahead and see what you got, man.
Let's
Cool.
dig this bike.
Yeah, sounds good. So basically, we have the Honda Z50, all modeled in Moto. So yeah, it's what's interesting about this piece is the first piece that I created in Moto was a Honda Ruckus, and that's when I was just first learning. I think it was Moto 201, and I never actually finished the bike, and it was one of the projects that I really enjoyed doing, and I just wanted to kind of pay homage to it by creating this another version of a Honda. And again, as I mentioned before, it's got a lot of hard surface and a lot of variety. The opportunity for a lot of gloss, reflection, dirt, chip metal, graphics, wires, all the fun stuff that you see in a lot of the games that you play uh, today. But yeah, I mean, I had the parts manual for this, reminding me to put it together. Modeling, it started with a block in, basically roughed in all the geo really quick. I just wanted to get all the pieces and parts in place. That was maybe a 2 or 3 hour job. Then I realized pretty quickly that I needed to start building this from the inside out, because the frame is basically the start of the bike, and then everything attaches to it. So I built the frame, and basically during the modeling I used Catmull Clark subdivision, a lot of edge weighting, planning of UDIMs and textures and texture sizes and what resolutions I wanted to paint at. But yeah, in the end, I really pushed myself to exclusively use Moto on pretty much every part of this bike, including the shock, the chains, the tank, and the geometry is pretty simple. This is the geometry we're looking at here is basically not a cinematic level of quality, nor is it a game resolution. It's more of a resolution that I prefer for painting, and that has a lot to do with like my video card and my PC that I'm using, so that it actually runs smoothly and everything is possible to paint. And I'm able to get once all the technical parts are basically passed, I could focus on the fun parts, the creative parts. But yeah, basically, once I got out of
Cool.
Moto,
You want to
yep. Sorry, go ahead, Greg.
do you want to maybe turn off the environment light really quickly and kind of start talking people through some of the ways that you set up these multiple materials?
Sure, absolutely. So yeah, moving into Mari, basically, you guys please have a little patience. This setup here is a little bit different than I usually have at home. But yeah, basically using a environment inside of Mari that you can switch. It comes standard with Mari 3. It's quite nice because with PBR workflows, the idea is that you paint in one environment and it pretty much works in any environment you drop the asset into. And this has been really quite nice to be able to visualize this asset. So basically I have a point light that's giving me a little bit of shadow. You can move these around, which is pretty cool. First part in the Mari setup for the paint. Once I had my model done, I basically did UVs, and in this case I did 4K maps, and with the idea that it could potentially be scaled down to one map. So once I had the model imported into Mari, the first thing I did was essentially went through and assigned basic colors to everything, made sure that all the surfaces were represented. You have the metals, the rubbers, the pleather, the plastics, and the steel. So this is a pretty basic setup. And if we look at the channels, sorry, the layers, basically on this end we have rubber, leather, plastic 1, plastic 2, paint 2, paint 1, black metal, and then just a bare metal, which is the base. And I'm thinking of this in terms of if I were to have made this model in out of clay or out of high density foam, how would I actually paint it up? And I'd probably start with wanting to have a base of a steel, and then move into adding the layered paints and the rubbers on top. But yeah, really quickly I went through and I set up all of these different layers and channels using the BRDF. So the BRDF is basically the parent of the channels and layers. The layers and channels are pretty much the main two windows that I was using to author the asset. But yeah, in this case, the BRDF out of the box, what I ended up using was the glossiness, the color, albedo, glossiness, normal, reflectance, specular, and then I have a bump. But yeah, so once that was set up inside of each channel, basically I have a color, a procedural color constant, and a mask. The idea there is that the procedural color constant could easily be changed. So we have, as an example, the paint is just a color constant that you can move around and pretty much make any color you want. And what isolates that tank is essentially this mask that I can show you here. So this is my paint layer. Um, this is the black metal layer. We have another paint layer, and they're all pretty much the same. So essentially what I did is I created one, I got one working, and then I just simply went down and copied them. One of the cool things is if you have multiple materials using an individual color, you can share layers too. So that's here's the logo. So that's one of the techniques that I used in this as well is the sharing of layers.
So can you explain to people how you share layers really quickly?
Yeah, it's basically it's as simple as a left click and a shift drag and drop. So like if for example uh, these uh, these three colors are all the same color, which in this case they're not, but if they were the same color, I would be able to go to the main parent layer in color and essentially select this and drag and drop it into glossiness, reflectance, specular. So as an example, like we have color, if we're looking at the color channel and we isolate to this fender, which is a plastic, this plastic is also in glossiness, which has its own value, which is this gray value is basically intended to determine the gloss of the object. But the mask is exactly the same. So all of these masks are shared between glossiness, reflectance, and specular. The only thing that's different about them is the constant color. So this is one of the nice things about being able to use masks inside of Mari is that you can have mask stacks that have shared layers in them. So essentially, if you adjust the color layer, it goes through and propagates down to anything that is shared, like your gloss. Adjusting your one color value could adjust your gloss, reflectance, and specular values all at the same time. Does that pretty much answer your question, Greg?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
cool. But yeah, that I wanted to keep this setup pretty basic and pretty yeah, simple for me to be able to go through and having channels that are all very similar, that all have consistent layer names and layers in them was pretty key to making sure that this all kind of didn't get too crazy and hectic and out of control. But yeah, once I had the basic colors down and the glossiness, reflectance, specular values, I didn't use any measured values, which a lot of studios are doing. A lot of proprietary plugins out there that will give you out of the box the correct values for a paint or a steel, which is very cool. So in this case, I pretty much eyeballed everything and ballparked it, which is pretty easy to do the once you have these color swatches are quite nice. It's a non-destructive workflow too, which is pretty cool. So that like I can't really wreck anything here. So if I change the color of the paint, it's always recoverable by eye dropping another paint and reselecting it. So it's not like it's a texture being edited.
That's pretty important thing to mention. Definitely is the non-destructive nature of Mari, and you're managing these different materials by masking between these different materials, correct?
Yeah, Yeah. So
Can you show people setting up a mask stack? Because that's one of the big things I think is awesome is the layered mask stacks, which makes the masking process non-destructive, and that's something that a lot of people don't really grasp about Mari.
yeah, I can go through that. You want to see that?
Yeah, absolutely, please.
All right, let's do that. So let's put a number on this bike. Does that sound like a good idea?
Awesome.
Yeah, let's do that. So basically, what I normally do is, like I mentioned before, I started with one, and then I basically, once the one worked, I copied it. So in this case, let's go ahead and go to the color. So I always use color as my root, and I'll go ahead and I'll pick rubber, and I'll copy it, and I'll paste it, and then we'll call this one logo 82. So if we look at logo 82 now and look at the mask that's assigned. So logo 82 right now is basically the color constant, which is this chip, and then the mask. So if we isolate that, I usually have shaders, channels, and layers all in order. That's just how I think about how everything is set up. So isolating the specific channel in or layer I should say in Mari has been pretty powerful because it really kind of helps me learn where everything is. And in this case, because I copied uh, the rubber mask is isolated the tires. You don't really want that for the logo, so what I'll do is I'll kill that. I'll just use the hard surface brush because that one's nice to it's easy to do some quick cleanup work with. Alright, I'm going to bake that. Hitting the B key. Go into perspective. So now I have a clear mask. And in this case, we'll go into orthographic view. This is one of the things I really enjoy using a lot with Mari is the orthographic view because you can go into the exact view that you want. And let's go ahead and put that number right here on the side. So I have the mask selected. I'm going to hit P for paint. And then I'm just going to quickly paint in where I want in general, where I want the number to go. So that looks pretty good, somewhere right in there. And then I will just make sure that's working. Hello. Okay. Just save my file in case. Okay, so now that we have a spot, I'm going to go ahead and just test to make sure that this is working. Oops, had the wrong layer selected. That didn't look good. Just 1 second. Gonna move that to the top just so that I know that it's nothing. Alright, just 1 second. Gonna isolate the views. So isolating the view is always a tool that I use to make sure that I'm in the right place that I need to be. That looks really that's weird. I'm going to right click on this and convert to paintable. I hit the P key. Oh, it's not working for some reason. Sorry guys.
Oh, it happens. It wouldn't be a demo if you didn't.
That is pretty weird. Just check a couple things here. Sometimes projections are on that you don't want. mask. There we go. All right, so
So is that one thing selected?
yeah, so I'm basically going between the mask and the now paintable layer. So I switched it from being a constant to a paintable. And as you can see in this case, what I ended up doing is painted what looks like these two ugly spots here. So that's where we're going to project the number. And I'm going to go into the image manager. So the image manager is really quite nice to use because what I'll do is, in addition to having a lot of the logos, graphics, decals, sometimes I'll throw a reference in there as well, so I can open up from time to time and work and double check that the things I'm doing are actually accurate to the real world asset or counterpart that I have. In this case, I imported a 82. I'm going to go ahead and drag that over, and let me grab my pen. Scale that down. So shift control left and right will basically scale. So I'm going to go ahead and position this in a spot where it looks pretty cool, and then that looks pretty good. And then I'll hit the, let's see, go up to the top here and I'll change drag this out. This is one of the things that I always find interesting is anybody that I'm ever working with that's first learning Mari, will want to use this technique, but for whatever reason, this panel here needs to be slid over. And use my mouse, move it over. Come on, there it is. It's not letting me slide, but if you can see, there's this paint through. Hold on, guys, we're having some. There it is. So by moving that panel over, what you basically do is you expose how the projection painting works. So in this case, I'm going to say luminance. Usually I have to do a lot of guessing between luminance and inverted luminance. And then I'm going to go ahead and hit the K to switch to my hard surface brush. R button scales your brush up. Sorry, this tablet is not quite doing what I want it to do. There it is. R scales your brush, and then I'm going to paint. And then if nothing is showing up, I want to check the layers, hit the X key. Basically, that toggles your white and black. So in this case, I'm painting. Try inverted luminance. Looks like I'm having some graphics cards issues here. Oh, that's really weird. Not sure what's going on there. Awesome. That's not what we want. Sorry. Let me try that again. That was not a graphics card issue. That was user error.
Yeah, another thing too with your tablet, I have the top button on the Wacom pen set to middle mouse.
Okay. All right. So now we got our 82 projecting on finally. Sorry for the delay. Usually it goes a little bit faster than this. All right. Let's do a white one. So if you don't like that, you can basically erase by painting over, because you're just basically painting on a mask. Like if we were to look at what layer I'm painting on right now and just isolate that channel, one of the things I'll do is I'll completely fill the UVs. I'll go into the UV view, and then boy, nothing's working today. What is going on? Sorry, I don't feel like I'm choking here. Greg, am I disappointing you?
No, not at all. This is the way that things go. Just take it one step at a time.
All right, here we go. Let's try that again. Let's go back to this. Hit B to bake, and then I'm going to hit L to open up my image menu again. Drag my 82 back on the thing, hit L to close. Let's try this again. Okay, there's my 82. All right. The P, project. Let's look at let's see what that did. All right, so we got the number. The white number is on there. And now what you're seeing on the outside of that number is basically the mask. So if we look at the mask, it's going to be a little bit sloppy. And what I'll generally do is usually you can go through and hand edit this, or you could just try this trick here. L82, scale this up so we can match it back up to my mask. Yeah, that looks good. You know what, I'll just do it manually. So yeah, basically just hit the K. Usually the hard brush is pretty nice, just for being able to clean up masks if you need to. I'm going to go ahead and just do a quick pass at this. Pen isn't working, so bear with the mouse art. I'll try it again here. Whoops. Okay, yeah, that's better. Yeah, yeah, there's something up with this pen. I'm gonna go mouse. Just do a really quick job here. It'll be a little sloppy. So this is pretty much how I did the Honda logo. Is the same way. I mean, I was a little bit more careful in how I was painting the mask, but for the demo, I'm just going to do this really fast, just so that you can get an idea. And sorry that hasn't been fast. Using a different system here has thrown me off my game a little bit. I don't have all my hotkeys and things. All right. I'd say that looks good enough. Let's see what it looks like on the. Okay. I'm gonna go ahead and use filters, brightness, and do a little quick adjustment. Make that darker. Give it a little bit more. There's the rough 82. We'll weather that up so it doesn't look quite as sloppy. It looks like B2 actually. All right, so now that we've got the color channel pretty much sorted out, we have the layer, the paintable layer, and then the mask. And in this case, what I'll do is I'll just go ahead and copy this, and then go into glossiness, and I'll paste it in there, right on top of the other logo. And then what I could also do is reference, but for now I don't want to get too fancy. I'm just going to go ahead and paste them in manually. And as you can see, the specularity and such starts to work as well right away. So now we have an 82 in there, and it doesn't really look like it has any specular influence, and that's mostly because I just dragged and dropped a map into the spec that's completely black. So if we go ahead and isolate that, I can go and invert this, apply, make it white or lighter. I'll do the same with the reflectance. I use the invert filter a lot. Mari has a lot of really nice filters that allow you to do um, image manipulation, hue, saturation shifts, all the good fun stuff that you have been doing in image in your other traditional 2D image editing programs. So at this point, if we look at the go back to shaders and click on our BRDF, it should have a little bit of specularity. We've got like a Chrome logo. But yeah, that pretty much sums it up for how I added the layer. And then in terms of sharing, Greg, I will basically show you that next in the dirt layer.
Yeah, that'll be good to see.
Yeah. So once I got a little bit of paint there on the back bumper. So yeah, once we had all the other two logos on the bike and all the other parts were done essentially exactly the way I just did the 82. The seat was the same way. The tank, the rubber tires, the handlebars, the grips, and then even the plastic pieces, if you will. Actually, it doesn't look too bad. It's kind of cool. But yeah, if we wanted to add a little bit of dust to the bike, kind of weather it up a little bit. I basically did the same thing. I created a copy of one of my layers and inside of the color channel, going back to the top again. If we look at dust, it's essentially it's the same thing. The main difference here is that I created a mask stack. And if you click on the mask stack, what it allows you to do is have more than one mask. In this case, I only have one dust mask in this group, and what I did was I Control Shift dragged it into my glossiness stack, and then also my reflectance stack. So anything now that I do in my color channel for the dust should also affect all of my other channels. So I'm going to give that a try right now. Let's do some scaling, and select the mask stack. So I'm going to go ahead and pin this window so that it's there. Select the layer. So as you can see, it's already I'm already able to paint dust on the bike. And the nice thing about it is that I'm only painting with one layer at this point, and I've sat down and I've kind of thought about what I wanted the dust to look like. So it's already pre-tuned. In other words, I went through the glossiness, reflectance, spec channels, and I made adjustments so that the painting the dust would be the dust that I think is matte enough to work. So I'm just going to go ahead and block out some quick patches of dust. And normally what I do when I'm painting is I'll just go through and I'll just hit some areas that I think would be pretty dusty or dirty. In fact, I'll also, one of the other tools that I'll use is if you click on the projection palette, there's a lot of ways to mask your model, real-time masking, which is really awesome. So in this case, I'm going to do back face mask and edge mask. And I'll usually keep mask preview enabled on all of the time because, well, in this case, it looks like I'm not going to leave it on any of the time because this video card doesn't appear to be playing well with it. But usually I'll leave the projection on, and that's a real-time visualization of where the masking is happening. And in this case, it should be masking off all my back faces, which helps with reducing some of the streaking and such. But yeah, I'm going to go ahead and just add a little bit more on here. Go back to my layers. Click on this. Yeah, that really botched up the card there. It did something. Let me just try something here. So just like I projection painted the logo, I'm going to go ahead and use that on the dust as well. So hitting the L key will bring up this menu and then give you the ability to paint luminance value through the texture. And I'm going to change my brush back to Stormy Cloud. So my two go-to brushes are Storm Cloud and the hard surface. So one's an organic and one's in hard surface. Usually for this sort of thing, I'll use the Storm Cloud brush because it gives me a lot of pressure. The pressure sensitivity works on it. It's got nice fall offs, and let me see if you could see that. Let me try it on the seat here. I might have to restart. There's some craziness going on here. A second. So back on the dust map. Turn this off. Let's try that one more time. Dust, selected the dust layer and the color channel, selected the mask stack, and then selecting the map inside the dust mask. Okay, there we go. All right, cool. So now we're using the texture to project onto the seat. And then what I'll normally do is I'll use the eraser at this point. This is a trick I usually use. Before it's actually baked down, you could actually erase bits and parts of it, which ends up giving it a pretty cool look, especially around the edges of things.
Explain to them a little bit about the reason why that we have this floating canvas.
Um, the floating canvas. Well, you can move the projection paint around, which is kind of neat. But right now I have it set up so that when I rotate the camera, it bakes down. But just really quickly, you can kind of see how just a little bit of work got me a really nice dusty seat there. And I'm going to go ahead and do an invert. And I'll usually go between inverted luminance and regular luminance to kind of break up the texture a little bit. And if you notice when I rotate, it's also affecting the specular. And from time to time, what I'll do is I'll rotate the lights to kind of give me a better idea of how that's affecting the surface. So yeah, in this case, you can kind of see rotating the light shows us that this dust is coming with a glossiness, reflectance, and specular factor. So then going back to this piece that I had originally painted, again, it's in the color. The one color channel is and color layer is actually driving multiple maps, which is pretty cool and really powerful. In this case, I've just kind of kept it pretty simple for the demo. We're going to go ahead and click on the dust mask again, and then just quickly test that it's working. It is. Hit the L key, drag the texture back out, and hit X to inverse. And then you can see it gives you kind of a little bit more a grimy, dirty look. So I'm not using too many gimmicks on this. Basically, I'm using dust and paint chips for this exercise, but Normally, what I'll do is I'll have a number of gimmicks. Like I'll have dust on an object, dirt, grease, and a number of things. If it's a metal surface, I'll have maybe two or three different metals to blend through. This dust actually, if we go to the tire now and start painting, okay, I'm going to hit the L key, and I'm going to give this tire a little bit of dust, and I'm going to go ahead and rotate around. Whoops. Can Control and left mouse button will basically rotate around, rotate your mask around. And go ahead and blend. And the bike looks pretty cool with a little bit of dust. We'll get some back here. Maybe that's a... I just usually do things really, I just rough in parts, and then I'll go back and refine. And you can see the stretching here, which isn't really a big deal because you can go back in there and clean it up. And then basically if I hit the X key and invert the luminance, maybe expand this a little bit, it gives you a little bit of a blend. And painting, this is all basically I'm painting it all in 3D. Hit the O key will change opacity. So if you just wanted to do just get rid of a little bit or a lot, you can kind of see there it's changing. So a lot of the work I'll do is like this, where it's very specific, and there's a lot of pieces that are really customized weathering passes or decals that you can't really do procedurally, and this really is quite cool and fast. I'm actually pretty surprised at how well I'm able to adapt to such a different setup, because usually what I'm basically have two or three monitors to work on. So right now everything is jammed onto one monitor, but the basic concept is pretty much the same. I have my shaders, channels, and layers all available to me, and really in that order: shaders, channels, and layers. So yeah, that's the dust. And then sometimes I'll even use things like dust on metal surfaces to break up the speck a little bit and to not use as many channels. It's pretty powerful. So like if just taking this dust and coating this metal with it really starts to give you a nice pitted metal look. And then again, using a little bit of the eraser.
Hey Nick, just really quick, had a question come in. Well, I have a couple questions coming in, but people are asking if you can paint on many channels, color, specular, glossiness at the same time.
You can, and that's essentially what I'm doing. Like if you notice this dust mask, I'm
Hmm.
in the color, and I have the dust mask selected. I'm going to isolate that so that you guys can see what it actually looks like. And it's just a black and white mask, which is really nice
Hmm.
because it's basically a control map that allows you to quickly and easily work. But yeah, if we then go into channels and go into specular and then isolate the specular dust channel, or sorry, dust mask, you'll notice it's exactly the same map in two different places. And if you look here on the label, it says share.dust mask. So it's essentially pinning one mask and getting it in multiple channels. So the shader is basically mapped to include all of the. I'm not using all of them, but I think
Right.
I'm not using the AO channel. But yeah,
Okay,
does that
cool.
answer your question?
Yeah, well, it answers the individual's question here. I think he was also asking, or could you use one mask for all of them? I guess you could probably collapse things
Oh
in the
yeah,
future when you need to.
Yeah, you could.
Um,
You could, in fact, if you just wanted the color map to have like all of the albedos live in one space, you can do that.
mhm.
The disadvantage of it is that it won't be as adjustable later. So, like right now, I have control over many parts of the model, and this is one of the things that's pretty important because if your art director or creative director says, "Listen, we don't really want that red," or we've decided that the color needs to change, it's really easy to go back in, select your color, and because everything's in separate channels, you can easily change the color. So like in this case, I'll just show you guys that. It's pretty cool. So we've got that blue. I'm going to go ahead and apply it to the fenders. And then you got a totally different look. And you can export a different version.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, and then I also did paint chips. That was the other gimmick that I threw into this is if we look at that, I'll just show you guys really quick how that works. It's pretty cool because it kind of gives you the idea that your bike is basically gotten chipped up by rocks and such on the road. So let's go ahead and pick that.
Definitely. Here, real quick, do you use a lot of reference images for your work just to get an idea of how sort of realistic um, you know particles lie on surfaces?
Yeah, yeah, that's a pretty good question. Are you there? Hello. Hello.
Hey, Nick, you still there?
Yes. Are you guys there?
Yeah, we just lost audio real quick. So what were you just saying? Sorry about that.
Um.
Yeah.
Uh. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Sorry, that threw me off. What were we talking about? I was going to show you guys one other feature about Mari. Um. Yeah, Brandon, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Okay. So just like the dust, I just wanted to show you guys this really quick too before we run out of time because it's pretty cool. You can go ahead and paint um, into a layer in the same way that I'm sharing the dust in the glossiness, the color albedo into the glossiness, reflectance, and specular channels. I'm also doing that with a bump. So as I'm painting, you can kind of see there's a little bit of an edge there, and it's pretty cool because this same deal works with masks as well. So you can get a scratch map and paint on top of it. Kind of gives you a nice a bit. It gives you the ability to really go in there and make this thing look worn and weathered. I don't know if that's picking up, but you can see that there's a different specular. Uh, yeah, cool. Thanks. So you can kind of see the edge in there. And and for this project, what I ended up doing is I um, made only a few, like I said, a few of the features. But yeah, I think when I finish this, I'll probably go ahead and do more grease, more variants in the leather, and different types of metals, different colors. That go in and detail more of the grip. I'd probably look into some more procedural ways of adding detail as well. But yeah, um, the other thing that I think is really powerful about Mari is that when you're working, you can version your model, which is very cool. Um, Inside of View palettes, there's an Objects palette. which will essentially allow you to import a different version of this bike. So if I had a version that had a kickstand and the handlebars turned, or even a completely different seat, I can import that and essentially check to see both versions, look at two versions at once. Um, what else do we got? Were there any other questions, Brendan, on the message board?
Can anyone hear me over there?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Okay, so you can still hear me?
Yeah.
All right, good. I thought I was off for some reason. So, really quick, just yeah, wanted to ask you a couple questions. I know that it's a different system for you in use right now for the demo, but as far as like sort of keyboard shortcuts, how versatile is Mari in that respect as far as setting up custom keys? One of the users made a question that you had been doing a lot of mouse clicks on menus and drop downs. So,
Just like any other 3D software. It definitely allows you to customize your hotkeys. I'm pretty much a big fan of leaving the software at its default state, and mostly because I'm usually like today, like I switched computers. I'm on a completely different system. Having a few hotkeys, I think are pretty are good is good to have. But yeah, I'm generally not like a big customizer. But yeah, I mean, just like in any other program, you can customize the hotkeys pretty easily in Mari.
yeah, awesome. Yeah, it totally answers the guy's question. Yeah, I mean, it's good to have versatility there because you can add in your hotkeys, make things faster, but also knowing the default layout of the program makes it a lot easier to obviously use other systems, and if you are at a location doing any sort of work, definitely helps you out there too.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I've that's definitely not any. Yeah, it works out of the box. There's some really nice stuff.
Awesome. Well, hey, Nick, I think we're gonna have Greg start to show his production example off, and want to thank you so much for your demo here. And sorry about the issues with the computer.
Oh, no
That's
worries.
that's totally not your fault, and you're a trooper, and you definitely showed us a lot of good stuff in Maury. So,
Cool.
want to hand it over to Greg real quick.
Okay, thanks. See you, everybody.
Yeah, thank you so much, Nick. Really appreciate it.
That's good. Hello, hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, you are
Okay.
live.
Beautiful. Hey, how's it going, everybody? Once again, sorry, we decided to try out another test in this one, and that is doing it from the office with everybody present in the office. And really, we probably need to do it on, the systems that everybody is comfortable with. But definitely want to thank Nick for showing us that. He does some great work, and I'm sure you guys will see him more on the forums. Are you going to post that in the forums, maybe as a work in progress? Yeah, that'd be awesome. So we can, continue to show people, how you work. And it seems like projects are never ever done anyway, especially if it's your own personal project. And all right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the basics of baking. We're going to have a more complex discussion about baking and specifically normal baking with James O'Hare very soon this month. But at least want to go through the basics of baking in Modo because there's a lot of different ways you can bake in Modo. Like for instance, we have the baking toolkit. That's one way you can bake. We're not going to talk about that one today. But if you use Modo Indie, I want to make sure you also know how you can approach baking. And there are a lot of nuances to it, actually. So let me go ahead and plug in my hard drive here so that I can show you guys something. Probably be good, right? Dope. All right. And we're going to talk about a lot of the cool features with baking. So we're going to talk about hard surface baking for kind of like props and things of that sort. We're going to talk about baking for environments. And we're also going to talk about a really cool feature in Modo, which is called the rounded edge shader. The thing about baking in Modo is that we leverage our render engine for baking. And because of this, some of the other features in our render engine are capable of producing really, really cool effects. And so to kind of start off with the basics of baking, let's just open up a very simple object and we're going to go through the process of baking that down. All right, and so no, don't want that one. I think for some reason that drive, it does not like, why doesn't it like that drive? Just transferred files over on this. And so, 1 second. Why is that not? Oh, okay. Probably doesn't like that port. One more moment. Brandon, this is a great time for you to be charming. Brandon.
Hey, there you are.
There we go. All right. Of course, it's a wonderful system. It has a busted USB port. Okay. And let's go ahead and open up this bake test file. So, kind of a stereotypical example that is often used for baking. You know, just an object that has a bunch of hard edges. And what we want to do is we want to round these edges, right? And typically, you would actually go in and have a high-res object and a low-res object and bake between them. That, of course, is the way that you typically would work. And if you wanted to, we could duplicate this. And what if I wanted to go ahead and use this as a bake source? I could subdivide this a couple more times. Maybe one more time. Go ahead and turn that into sub the item. And there we basically have some nice simple bevels. And so let's just go through how we bake from and to an object. Now this high-res object does not need to have any UVs. And in fact, I probably want to get rid of those UVs to make sure they don't conflict. And you see when I click on the cube item, we have a default UV map. And you know what? Let's just go ahead and delete this. When I come up to my low-res object, which now we're going to rename low-res, and high-res object, you can see we have a UV map that has the same name. This is one of the issues that you may run into. You want to make sure that you don't have two UV maps with the same name between the objects. That can cause certain errors that'll actually almost bake over. So you either want to rename them to be distinct or make sure that your high-res object doesn't have any. If you have textures with UVs on there, rename it. And you can do this just by right-clicking on UV maps texture, and you can rename. Or you can just double left click, or single left click on top of that, and you can rename that. But for our purposes right now, that is just fine. Now we're going to need some UVs here, and setting up those UVs is actually rather easy. And there's a bunch of really cool features with selection that can make that a lot easier. And so if we come on up here, we could go ahead and select sharp minimum 89.5 degrees, and you see what it just did there? It grabbed any edges that have a sharp angle to it. And that, of course, makes our lives a lot easier with selecting any sort of hard edges. And so another reason why, even if you're doing any sort of sub-D modeling, using edge creasing inside of Modo, so you get these perfect nice creases once you're ready to do your UVs, makes life loads and loads easier. Let's go ahead and just do a quick unwrap, and that looks pretty good. Let's go ahead and pack our UVs. I don't want to do that with edges selected. Pack our UVs, and there we go. Don't like that. Let's go ahead and pack them with a vertical direction, and we'll have something a little bit more organized. All right, so we have our UVs in place right now. Now the advantage there too is that we want to have all the edges that are going to be hardened to actually be a separate UV island. James is going to talk about this more in the later baking segment. And now we have a low-res and a high-res object, and we want to capture all that nice detail in our high-res object. All right, so let me come on over to my surface options. This is another one that gets people a lot of times. When you are selecting your high-res object, you want to come down to Properties and Surface, and you have subdivision level and render level. And so subdivision level applies to your viewport. Like if I raise this, we have a slightly higher sub D level now. But at the render level, which is what we're going to be using for baking, it needs to be set to that same level or even higher. Like you could have, drive it up to a really high level if you want to make sure that your bake comes out really clean. And if you have enough memory in your system, of course. Now, a couple things here, like you can see that here, since I'm in the UV edit layout, I've got my low res object as my primary, my high res object as the background object, and they're overlaying on top of each other. A couple of things that you can do. You could come over to inactive meshes and you can make inactive invisible. It will still bake. That only affects the actual viewport itself. So now we want to have some materials, and we might as well apply a high res material. So we'll call this high, and we'll name this low res with hitting the M key as in material, low. And so now if we come over to our shading tab, and we don't need this here, I'm just going to tuck that away. We now have a material for low and a material for high. We talked more about the shader tree, how materials operate, and how they're actually masks in the third webinar. We'll have the second and third webinar up for you guys next week. So we'll come over to add an image. And so in this case, what we want to do is we want to make a normal map. So if you wanted to, you could actually come over into the sculpting palette, which in this case, you probably access it from here, layout, palettes, and sculpt and paint toolbar, and underneath utilities you can add a color, displacement, mask, for texture, all sorts of stuff really quickly with one click. But we want to have some specifics since we're doing a normal map. We probably want a 16-bit PNG. So you come up to add layer, image map, and I want to create a new image, and I will name this something very clever and descriptive, as you can see. And we want to change the type over to 16-bit PNG. And I generally set my color space to linear in that case. And you can set your resolution, say you're baking a displacement, you can turn it to floating point. Setting that to linear just affects the way it's going to display in here. You can see we have actually basically a blank PNG image here. I might need to use a Targa. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and actually just use a Targa instead. And so I think I'm going to have a problem because there's something funky going on there. So new image, and I'll leave that at Targa. And again, something massively descriptive, right? And so save that, and we'll go ahead. I don't really want that in linear right now. All right, and so now we have another image here. Both these are set to diffuse color. I'm going to delete this one just to reduce some confusion. And all right, so now that we have that in place, what you want to do is you want to change the effect. Now, this is one of the first methods of baking inside of Modo, and that is baking within the shader tree. And so for any sort of like normal based or, like something like a displacement or a normal or bump map, you probably want to do that through the shader tree inside of material here. First thing to do, change your effect. Right click on over the effect, and you see we get all these crazy effects. And what we want to do is come on down to surface shading and change that to normal. And now it's a normal map. And you can see it does some crazy funky stuff once you throw that on the first time. It's because it's a blank image that's being read as a normal map, and so it really doesn't know how to deal with it just yet. But if you remember, we still have this high-res object in the background, and we want to bake from that. And so if I come down to the actual image itself, we'll make sure that's toggled on. I right-click on top of it. You can come down here, and you can tell it to bake to texture, bake to file, which is of course nice, and also bake from object to texture. In this case, we want to bake from object to texture because we're baking from that secondary high-res object. So I could go ahead and click on bake and bake from texture from object. And you have some options. You can set your distance, or you can use a cage. Let's talk about using a cage really quickly. I'm going to close it down and not actually do it. So in this case, we probably want to have both visible. And what we do in Modo, as far as dealing with cages, is we set up a cage as a morph map. It's a nice way to have a bunch of different cages and continue tweaking them. So underneath morph maps, which is underneath UV maps, I can come over to create a morph itself. And when that's selected, I'm going to use the model tool, deform, and in this case, push. Push usually does a very good job. And I can go ahead and just push on out so that it encapsulates the object, that the high-res object that is going to be baked from. And now if I toggle that off or on, you can see that it basically is recording that morph in the mesh itself. It's one of the big advantages of Modo, the way it deals with vertex maps. Morphs are vertex map. Texture or UV map is a vertex map, and it's contained in the mesh. And so you could have as many of these as you wanted to. You don't have to have a secondary mesh that references it, essentially. All right, and so now that we have that in place, let's make sure we've got our low res selected. You want to have your low res selected. You also want to have your UV map selected as well. Right click on this, and I want to bake from object to texture. And now I can choose a cage instead of setting a distance. And a cage just comes out with more consistent results, less warping, things of that sort. So it has some significant advantages. All right, and so now we're baking from an object to texture, and you can see how it's actually baking that into place. And this is another good opportunity to articulate one of the big issues that people have. All right, so you see now it's done, and it's actually expanding the edge boundaries. Cool, it expanded the edge boundaries for us. That's very useful. But we didn't actually set how far we want it to go. You can see we got a pretty decent little bake right there. Got those nice rounded edges on there, but if you look really close, you might end up seeing some errors. And I guess this is one of those moments where it's a basic enough of mesh you don't see the errors. But our bake border right now is really low. And where do you change your bake border? You come up to System, Preferences, and remember we do all our baking with our render engine. So it's underneath Rendering, Final Rendering, and you see we got this option, Bake UV Border Size. Right now it's 3. I can't tell you how much I learned about baking from James O'Hare, Farfair, who works for us now. He did the Vertex Normal Toolkit, which hopefully he'll talk about, the Texel Density Toolkit, which Nick fell in love with yesterday when we were talking about it. And what he always does, I remember telling him, I'm like, oh, it depends upon the resolution, 2048, I put it at like 6 to 8. And he's like, you're nuts. Set it to like 32 or 64. Just blow it out of the water because they won't cross each other. And so if I set my bake border distance to 32, I can now come up here and I want to bake from object to texture, use Arcade, and there you go. And it's going to take a little bit longer at the end of the bake to actually produce it. All right, wait, I just did something totally wrong right there. Let me just go ahead and rerun that again. Yeah, that totally screwed up. And so see, there you go. My high res was off. One of those things you always want to pay attention to. All right, so bake from object to texture. And so, like I said, it'll take a little bit longer once the bake is final because it's actually going to have to expand to a much larger distance, and then it's also going to have to make sure that they don't cross each other. But it makes life a lot easier. You're not going to end up troubleshooting a bake. Why am I getting seams? Things of that sort. Just setting it up to a really high level. And see, there you go. You see how it expanded those borders dramatically. And if I turn off my background object, there we have it. And so, a nice little bake. And now let's talk about some other methods, right? And so I've got this normal image here. I'm still going to use the same one. I don't want my background object on. And now let's use that super cool rounded edge shader technique. Because with ray casting a normal map or a displacement map, you are firing rays from one mesh to connect with another mesh. And while that's a really great way to get high quality normals, it's also a really great way to have problems because you're dealing with this ray casting. And Moto has this great feature that's perfect for games. Farfair, or not Farfair, Tor Frick uses this extensively, is the rounded edge shader. So it's like one of the great things that he figured out could be used for games that we didn't even know could be used for games. I can't tell you how many awesome things Alan Hastings adds that all of a sudden we find out later are useful for something else. So in your material settings at the bottom, you have rounded edge width. And so I'm going to set this to, say, 2 millimeters. And then I'm going to go ahead and turn off that normal map. And I'm going to go ahead and launch my preview renderer. I just launched that with F8. And you know what? It's a lot too low because we had like a 1 meter cube to start with. And if I come on down here and I set that down to 0, there we go. No rounded edge. Set this up to maybe, let's go with 6 millimeters. That seems about right to me. You see we get this beautiful rounded edge all over our model. And it's what it's doing technically is it's applying a normal map along this edge. And so what, Tor Frick realized was, hey, wait, if that's the case, doesn't this make my baking life a lot easier? We'll send this all the way up to 10 millimeters. All right, very cool. Now, because it's applying it in that way, now what we can do is use the render engine to actually capture that information. And instead of baking from object to texture, I can go ahead and turn this on. I can right click on this and I can just bake to texture. And what that's going to do is it's going to apply everything that is part of the shader tree. And since that's part of the material, the rounded edge shader is part of the material, it'll just capture it from the material settings. And so now you're not dealing with the hassle of baking between objects, the issues you run into with rounded edge shaders and the like. You just end up with something much more precise, much more accurate, much faster.
Hey, Greg.
Yeah.
1 second. Just wanted to ask if user question: Can
Mm-hmm.
can this rounded edge shader be used in combination with the normal map?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. Yes. You know what? we're going to be these webinars are going to be continuing past January. They end at the end of January, but after that, I'm just planning on we'll be planning other webinars, but we're just going to be hopping on and doing whatever comes to mind that day, I suppose. And I could show you the combination of that. In fact, with this pulse rifle that I have, I'll show you the pulse rifle in a minute. I actually bake an object to object normal map for the overall surface, but there's these really nice edges that I want to get to be really tight, and I use the rounded edge shader baking for that, and then I combine the two together, and it's a really really cool way of being able to work. But that's a workflow that takes a bunch of steps, and we'll talk on that one later. All right, and so this is a nice way of being able to add a rounded edge really quickly, really easily, and it's another way of baking because, like for instance, what if this was actually just a diffuse color texture, right? And so we're going to switch that on over to a diffuse color texture, and if I come down to my material settings, let's go ahead and add a normal map, or not a normal map, excuse me, a procedural image. And so enhance modo, and I'll come on over to noise, and I'm going to add a multifractal. And let's take a look at our, yeah, there we go. So I've got that in place. And see, if I have this image in the shader tree above this procedural image, and I decide, I want to capture that diffuse texture because they both have the same effect, diffuse color and diffuse color. I can right click on this and I can bake to texture, and that will capture everything beneath it. And you see, there we go. It's capturing that procedural. And of course, this works with things like the occlusion shader, which we talked about in the third webinar, which I absolutely freaking love. I mean, God, I can't tell you how much of my texturing I do just with the shader tree itself. Really quickly, just one moment. Just let me pause. Want to go out to lunch afterwards? We're going to be going for about another 20 minutes. Sorry, had to talk to Nick about going out to lunch afterwards. All right, so you can see how you're able to basically bake down a really big layer stack, and this is another nice way of being able to manage your procedurals, because also I'm going to use procedurals like crazy, and when you start having things like 20, 30 procedurals, the CPU is calculating that, and it starts getting very heavy. So this is a nice way to bake that information all down and in the end. All right, so now let's hop on over to this pulse rifle example, because I want to show you some of the cool other ways you can use Moto's tools to be able to like really pull off some interesting stuff. Particularly Mesh Fusion. I think I mentioned this in the Mesh Fusion demo, that you can actually bake a live fusion object. And so, you know what? I don't want my ambo. You can just go ahead and get rid of that, Moto. Thank you very much. And I've got my pulse rifle here. And let's go ahead and make some changes to the viewport so we can see everything. And you know what? I want my texture locators to be gone. I want to make inactive same as active. I want to see absolutely everything in this scene. And let's also go over to shaded mode because I completely borked all my materials by saying not load, telling it not to load them. So I'll toggle these off, Photoshop style toggling, and I've got my bake high and my bake low. All right, so I've got this pulse rifle here, and one of the things that I wanted to do was I wanted to add little slats, little cuts along the handle itself. Now I could model that, right? That's definitely one possible solution. But what I wanted to do is do this super fast, and it turns out Mesh Fusion is perfect for this. And so if I come on down to my actual handle group right down here, you can see I've got a couple different handles, and I can go ahead and toggle these aspects on. There's my handle bake. There we go. That's the one that I want. And so inside here, I've got my cutters. See my cutters in place right there. And then I've got an actual, mesh itself. That's going to be the bake from in this case. They're the same thing, just to make my life easier. So to use Mesh Fusion, I could just go ahead and select one item, followed by another. Control F to have quick access to this new Fusion item. And I want to subtract first selected from others. And so now this is creating a fusion relationship between my objects. And you can see now that it's actually producing a nice cut. Now I probably need to move these in a little bit further. You know what? I need to edit center selected along, I believe, yep, Z. And so that'll get things over a little bit. And I can also tweak and tune these because as you can see, it's way, way, way too sharp. No, I don't want that one. I just want my cutters. All right, so yank my cutters on over, and there we go. We have some nice little slices in here. And that's the type of thing that It's not hard to model, but it's time consuming. It's something that you're like, I don't feel like doing that. And at least that's how I feel about it. And, we can also come into the actual Fusion item itself. And do I have access yet to my actual, yes, to my curves, and I can modify the actual strip width a little bit to soften that up. And there we go. That's much more natural. That's exactly what I want to have. All right, and we can even come back over into default mode to see that a little bit more clearly. All right, so now I've got a Mesh Fusion item with cuts, and then I've got this Bake 2 mesh right here, and I want to make that not a sub item, which it is right now, and I want to capture that information. Now, if I turn this off, just to illustrate this again, and I open up our preview renderer, see, the thing that's cool about Mesh Fusion is you see, even while it's live, even while I can actually manipulate and mess with all these various attributes, I can still bake to it. And that's because it just works in the render engine. And this is one of those things that wasn't really thought about. It speaks to the modular nature of Modo and the advantages of the modular nature, the way that it's developed. And that Mesh Fusion just happened to render without all these extra meshes in place, and so of course it can be used for baking. And so let's go ahead and come on to our Bake 2 mesh, and I believe I have my Bake 2 item right there. Yes, I do. And I probably want my base shader up above that, which we talked about in a previous one. And let's go ahead and create a new image to actually bake to. And we need to check out our UVs, which I'm pretty sure this guy has pretty decent UVs. Now, a couple things about accessing your UVs. Like you can see it right there. Cool. I'm happy with how that looks. And let's go ahead and add an image map, new image, and we'll go with Targa. And again, something massively descriptive, right? Oh, I can't save to this location. How nice of you. I'll save to desktop or documents. There we go. And 2048, 2048, that's probably almost too much. And we'll just say OK. And so change that over to normal like we did before. And so now that's a normal map. And it's completely separate, right? And we want to make sure that that background object, again, I come to my item list and I go ahead and grab this one right here. Remember, we don't want to have a UV map on this. Delete that. Are you sure? Yes, I am sure. I only want the Bake 2 one. There we go. So we just have one right there. And now I'm going to go ahead and come on over to my shader tree. And I'm not going to bother making a cage. You could. But I want to bake from object to texture. You would usually want to hide everything away but this. In fact, I'm going to do that. Sorry about that, but I'll just go ahead and pull this out and drop it outside so I can toggle everything else off. So we're keeping it all nice and clean and basic. And so there we go. Bake from object to texture. And in this case, you know what, we don't need to be too specific. I'm just going to go with 10 millimeters. I'm basing that here on the grid as we see it. 10 millimeters is actually, probably way more than we need in this case on this mesh. And so there we go. Bake that on out, and I believe it's just hasn't hit our actual handle item just yet. There we go. And now it's actually hit it. And once that's done, you can see the slats already in place. If you want to zoom in the actual render view itself, you can certainly do that over here. And now it's going to go ahead and do our edge expansion for us. It's loading it up and applying it. And we'll turn off our high one. And so now we've just got this, and we just got this. And I will turn off my wireframe. And isn't that cool? That is a very nice bake. It's a very convincing bake, which I find very surprising, actually. And so, yeah, live Mesh Fusion items. And what if this is one of those situations that I constantly talk about where, I mean, anybody who's seen a lot of my demos, you probably think I hate art directors. I don't. I aspire to be one, I suppose. But you constantly run into these situations where somebody tells you that you have to make a big change. And if, you have aspects like this, like, slats that are cut into a handle, that is a final commitment modeling moment where you're like, okay, I'm putting these slats slats in place, and that's going to be a pain in the butt to go back to it or remodel it again. And this is a perfect situation for using Mesh Fusion to do little details and then use it for baking. Because if somebody comes back to you and says, no, I don't want 6 little slices here in the handle, I want 5, and I want them to be spaced evenly. It's like, no, please, you've ruined my week, and I'm not going to forget about this for months, and I'm going to hold it against you now. But what you can do is just hop on in there, use Mesh Fusion to do those slats, and bake the live object without even having to freeze it to a final mesh item, and that's pretty awesome. All right, so the last thing we're going to talk about baking is baking render outputs. And so this is very important. Like say you want to have custom light maps for an engine or something like that. This is a great way of actually doing that. So I'm going to grab my digital map painting scene, which is the one that we have that's nice and already set up for us. And there we go, my DMP original. We'll get that sucker open and show this to you. All right, so what are render outputs? If you're familiar with compositing, render outputs are really channels. And when you create a render, it's actually many different components. You actually have your direct lighting as a single pass. You have your indirect lighting as another pass, and you combine those together. Then you have your reflection shading as a pass. And if I come on over to my shader tree, where Modo contains all this information, is in the shader tree, usually it's at the top. You can just drop it into a folder. This isn't anything special by any means, where it says output. That's just a folder containing all your render outputs. You see we got a final color. That's what you see as the actual final render, and by default you'll have final color and you'll have alpha. And if I go ahead and just launch the render itself, you can actually see that going ahead and progressing on through. And this is final color. And in fact, if I change my effect in the preview render, you can see I can set that to final color, no change. But if I came up here and I, say for instance, selected something like ambient occlusion, everybody wants ambient occlusion. There we go. Now we're looking at our ambient occlusion render output. And you can render all these simultaneously, which is extremely useful. Send it out as a layered EXR, just a layered file in general. I like working in 32-bit, even if it's going to be an 8-bit texture in the end. All right, and we'll come back on over to just shading, which is really just the final color, which is everything combined together. But you see all these different render outputs that we have present here. So how do you bake them, right? So let's come on over to one of the components here, like the building right here. And you know what? I want to use this UV map, the top house UV map, and actually both of them are identical. This is just one of them that I've been messing around with. And let's see, Brandon is asking me something. What, Brandon? You can talk. Oh, am I doing it again?
Yeah, viewers are asking you to just speak a little bit slower.
Just a little bit slower?
Just a little bit.
I don't know how to speak. I sound like William Shatner when I can't speak slow. I'll try, guys. I'll really try.
And just real quick, just to interject, so we have some other questions here too.
Mhm.
Just some previous questions we weren't able to get to.
And interrupt me at any time, Brandon. You know this.
Okay, well sometimes I don't. So basically, can the rounded edge shader be used to bake a black and white image to use as a mask, like an alpha mask?
Um, hmm. You wouldn't use the rounded edge shader for that. You would use the occlusion shader, or you would use I'm forgetting the name of the actual texture or the material right now. Let's just go ahead and see where is it. So the occlusion shader right here is used to actually basically mask edges. What you do is you'd add the occlusion shader, and I'll just show the properties of it to you really quickly. And if I come on into my actual texture layers, see type right now is set to uniform. If I set that to convexity, I could use the occlusion shader to create a mask, and you can actually use that as a live mask as well. And then there's another one in here that I've just got to find, which is the RT curvature. Right here, which will do the same thing. You can actually find or mask a surface based on curvature, and you can modify that gradient in here. And so that might be something that's worth talking about a little bit further. Like I said, we're going to be continuing these webinars in a much more informal manner during February and stuff. And so, Brandon, mark that one down, and
Right,
we'll talk about
one
it.
more thing: is there 3D procedural noise that can be baked to UVs?
That is exactly what we just showed.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
So,
cool. And that goes a lot deeper. The thing is, we're trying to just show basics for now because I mean, I could talk about this stuff for, I mean, close to forever. But I want to get deeper and deeper and deeper after this webinar series goes further, and a lot more to talk about. Don't worry, but I just want to get those basics down. All right. So what if we wanted, say, for instance, this was an environment that we were baking, like maybe I wanted light maps or something like that. Maybe I just wanted various textures to composite together to like develop my textures further. And also, right here in the 3D view, all you see is a brick texture, but over here we've got a layered texture you can see with plaster revealing brick and all that stuff, and I want to bake that all down to one single UV map, right? And so I've got my UV map right here, nice and easy, and all I have to do is come on over to render, bake to render outputs. Now you don't have to bake from object because there's not another object that you're raycasting to connect with. All I want to do is bake down all those textures to a render output, and I want the render output, instead of it being a render, I want it to be the UV map, and that's what it's going to do. It's going to bake the render outputs to UV maps. And so let's go ahead and bake to render outputs, and now it is actually baking all my different outputs all at once. And so you see I've got my final color output right now displayed, but I also could come in and take a look at, there's my ambient occlusion, and here's my alpha output. And what if I wanted to take a look at even my surface ID through UVs? Another great thing to send over to Mari. Makes life really nice and easy. You can render all these render outputs simultaneously. And also, if you like using external baking applications, like for instance XNormal or something like that, there are render outputs, to get your geometric normal and bake it down through the render output, and that's what you would bring over to XNormal to actually convert it to the correct type of normal map for whatever engine you are using. But baking render outputs is awesome, as you can see, because you can just keep on adding more and more render outputs. And like, for instance, right now, if I just cycle through these drivers, we need to get into drivers. That'd be one for post-February. Drivers, they're confusing when you first use them, and then after that, you'll probably be using them on everything. But you can see like geometry, DPDU, DPTV, geometric normal, object coordinates. You can really pull out a lot of different render outputs for the different things that you might need, whether or not it's for textures or compositing or whatever. Even shading, if I just want to actually have, my reflection shading alone or my luminous shading alone. And so that is the, baking from render outputs themselves. And so it's important to understand the difference between baking a normal map. You see, I started talking fast again, and I stopped myself, sorta. So difference between baking inside your materials for an actual normal map, like we had over here underneath the pulse rifle, underneath the shader tree. We've got this one image here in the shader tree, or baking a render output like you see here in the DMP scene, with all these render outputs that are up here at the top. And of course, also baking within the shader tree itself to capture things like the actual rounded edge shader or other procedural style textures, things of that sort. All right, so hey, thanks so much guys for joining us for this webinar again. Definitely a few technical hitches here and there, or totally. Right, Brandon?
Totally. That model makes me want to jump. It reminds me of Qbert. So,
What does that have to do
does
with
anyone know?
anything?
I saw it and it reminds me of Qbert, so I just kind of want to jump. It's the
Brandon is the cap. We should just call you Captain Tangent.
yeah, that's sort of what I am.
Yeah.
Really quick here. Yeah, talking slow is hilarious. It is so true. It's so very hilarious. Yeah,
I'll
so
try and get the
CDR
New
saying, "Slow
Yorker
down," in all caps.
out of me. Yeah.
So that was fun. Yeah, now he's talking very slow. So there's two different modes that Greg goes. Well, there's a lot of different modes, but
Yeah.
for Greg, when he goes into presenter mode, he projects so much, and he's very loud, especially when you're on a show floor space. And
I
it's
was
really
relatively quiet.
Oh
I
no,
was really
you're,
this
you're
time.
good there.
Yeah.
But when you see Greg live at a show floor, it's actually quite a sight because everybody starts to trickle in from other booths. Everyone's like, "Oh my God, who's this loud, amazing person?" So everyone.
I think just loud. Yeah.
Well, everyone sort of trickles in, and it's good. It's good, and
So I'll try and slow it down
Yeah.
for the future ones. I'm sorry, I will not abandon my coffee. That's my blood. But yeah, we'll try and slow it down a little bit and more pacing. All right, but again, thanks for joining us on this one. I hope it was useful. Definitely, we are always welcoming to any feedback, and this is the start of an interesting year, to say the least. My goal here is to provide you guys with, what you need to be able to pick up Moto and start doing the things that are useful to you. Because I keep on running into people who are like, "This application looks awesome, and I don't know what to do with it." And so these webinars are meant to help that. And thank you, Brandon, for the help, and thank you, Nick, for showing us Mari. Yep, absolutely. So thanks again, guys,
And
and
as
we will
far as
see
the other
you.
webinars go, we will be uploading them soon. We had another question on webinar 2 for Mesh Fusion
Yeah,
recording.
there were with the switch to Twitch and the horrendous nature of the WebEx quality, and basically having to slap it all together. It's a lot of work to get everything back
Yeah.
together, and so I've got to fix webinar 2 and get that up. And webinar 3 came out gorgeous because it's
We
on
have to
Twitch.
unlearn what we have learned, basically.
Now we got to fix what we broke.
That too.
Well, thanks again, guys, and please, come back next Wednesday when we have our next one, and definitely looking forward to that. Nick, there's another Nick next week. This is scripter Nick, and he works. Oh God, why am I blanking on that? Raven works at Raven, and really has done some amazing work. He even helped us make a Doom importer exporter, just because I felt like playing around with Doom stuff in Moto, like Doom 3. All right, and this guy's amazing, and hopefully he'll be able to show you from an artist perspective how to approach Python scripting, and I'm going to learn a lot from that one, so I'm looking forward to it. So thanks again, guys.